Okay, so maybe you're staring at this massive stack of articles on postmodernism.
And you're thinking, I really want to get into Foucault and Derrida.
Now, who's got the time to wade through all the jargon, right?
Well, that's what we're here for.
On today's deep dive, we're diving headfirst into the work of Brazilian philosopher Christenoir.
And her book, Entre as Palavras e as Coisas, o uso uma ação nem sempre sensata.
She's got some seriously sharp insights on how those big thinkers we mentioned, Foucault and Derrida,
How their work is being both celebrated and misinterpreted,
especially in today's world,
which, let's be honest, can feel like it's straight out of a postmodern philosophy textbook sometimes.
talk about meta. But before we get ahead of ourselves...
Right, let's give everyone a little postmodernism 101 refresher.
Exactly. So when we throw around names like Foucault and Derrida...
Who are we actually talking about?
And more importantly, why should we still care about their ideas today?
Okay, so Foucault.
Michel Foucault.
Right, this French philosopher and historian.
He was obsessed with power.
I mean, really dug deep into how power operates in society.
And one of his big arguments...
Is that knowledge?
This thing we often take for granted.
Yeah, like it's this pure and objective truth.
He's saying it's not.
Not so fast. Foucault argued that knowledge is actually deeply connected to systems of power.
So hold on, are you suggesting that what we accept as truth is actually influenced by whoever happens to be in charge?
That's the crux of it. Foucault is fascinated by how those in control, whether it's governments, institutions, even just cultural norms, shape what we consider to be knowledge.
So it's not always some evil mastermind in the shadows.
Right, it's not always deliberate or malicious. It's more about understanding these subtle ways in which power operates behind the scenes.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but I need a real-world example. How does this actually play out?
Okay, take Foucault's work on the history of prisons.
Discipline and punish, right.
Exactly. He shows how the way we punish people has changed over time.
And not just the methods, but like the whole philosophy of punishment.
Right. And how those changes go hand in hand with how society views things like discipline and surveillance.
It's like, it's not just about locking people up. It's about controlling their bodies and minds.
He called it biopower, this idea that modern states control populations by managing things like health, reproduction.
And that's scarily relevant today, don't you think? I mean, we're seeing those very debates about things like vaccine mandates and reproductive rights.
Absolutely. It's like Foucault is handing us this decoder ring for understanding these very current power struggles.
Okay, so that's Foucault in a nutshell.
A very, very dense nutshell.
But what about Derrida?
Jacques Derrida,
He was all about deconstruction, right?
the master of taking things apart.
And by things, we mean language.
Precisely. Derrida dedicated his life's work to dissecting language and meaning
This French philosopher really shook things up.
because he challenged this very basic assumption that words have fixed, inherent meanings.
Like rose means rose no matter what, right?
Not so fast, Derrida would say. He dove headfirst into how meaning is constructed.
Unchallenged.
And how those power dynamics we were just talking about with Foucault come into play.
So it's like instead of language being this straightforward tool for communication,
It's more like this fluid, constantly shifting system, always open to interpretation.
and maybe even manipulation,
Exactly. And a great example of this is his concept of logocentrism.
which is a mouthful.
It is. But it basically critiques this Western tendency to put speech on a pedestal above writing.
As if the spoken word is somehow more truthful or authentic.
And Derrida argued that's just not true. Language is never completely neutral.
It's like he's pulling back the curtain on language and showing us the machinery at work.
All the assumptions, the biases, the power dynamics that shape how we make meaning.
And that's what makes both Foucault and Derrida so relevant to Denoir's work.
She argues that they've given us these incredibly useful tools for thinking critically.
But, and this is a big but,
Like any tool, they can be misused.
and we're back. Before the break, we were talking about how these two big thinkers, Foucault and Derrida, gave us some amazing tools to unpack power and language.
But those tools can be misused, right?
Right, and that's where Danois steps in. She wants to know, where do we see these postmodern ideas going off the rails?
Well, one of the biggest impacts and potential pitfalls, Danois argues, is this questioning of what she calls grand narratives.
So you're saying that instead of just accepting a simple narrative of science always progresses in a straight line, postmodernism pushes us to look at the messy historical and social forces that have actually shaped scientific thought.
Exactly. And Danois points out that this challenge to grand narratives can be incredibly valuable. right? It helps us see things from multiple perspectives to grasp that knowledge isn't always objective or neutral, that there are power dynamics at play.
But she also worries about this questioning going too far, leading to people just rejecting facts and evidence entirely.
That's the danger she's highlighting. Denois argues that Foucault and Derrida weren't out to simply deny reality. It wasn't about dismissing facts. It was about understanding their complexity and how our interpretation of those facts might be shaped by things like power and social conditioning.
Which feels especially relevant today when we've got folks denying things like climate change or the efficacy of vaccines.
Exactly. And it's in those moments that Denois brings up this really compelling example of a man who loves to cook. She argues that just because a man enjoys cooking and nurturing doesn't mean he's any less of a man biologically. It's not about denying biology. It's about recognizing that our expression of those biological traits is influenced by a whole host of cultural and social factors.
It's about being critical but not throwing out logic or evidence altogether. Okay, so questioning grand narratives is one area where Denois sees things getting tricky. What else does she dig into?
Another key area is this postmodern emphasis on discourse and social constructs, particularly Foucault's argument that institutions like schools, hospitals, prisons aren't just neutral spaces, they actively shape our understanding of the world.
So it's like those institutions have their own language, their own way of seeing and talking about things, and that influences how we understand concepts like mental health, criminal behavior, even gender.
Precisely. Our very understanding of what constitutes madness or criminal behavior isn't fixed. It's shaped by the very institutions tasked with defining those terms. And Denois argues this is where Foucault's work gets really interesting, especially when we start to look at how these power dynamics show up in conversations about gender and identity.
Which seems totally connected to that postmodern emphasis on difference and multiplicity, right?
Yeah.
The idea that there are multiple valid perspectives and lived experiences, that truth isn't always this singular fixed thing.
Exactly. And while Denois acknowledges how crucial this emphasis on difference has been for giving voice to marginalized groups and challenging those in power, she also points out a potential pitfall.
Because if everything is subjective, then how do we even have meaningful discussions or agree on anything?
That's the million-dollar question, and Denois doesn't shy away from it. She grapples with how this emphasis on individual experience, while important, can sometimes be taken to extremes.
And this is where her concerns about the work of Judith Butler, the renowned gender theorist, come in, right?
Exactly. While Butler's work on gender performativity, which builds on the ideas of Foucault and Derrida, was groundbreaking in so many ways, Denois worries that it's also contributed to this landscape where we're constantly questioning and redefining categories, leading to what some call the alphabet soup of labels.
Okay, so we're seeing how these ideas, while revolutionary, can become muddled and maybe even counterproductive when taken out of context or applied without that nuance and critical thinking that Denois keeps coming back to.
And that's exactly Denois' point. She's concerned that these complex ideas are being oversimplified, often on social media, where algorithms and economic agendas prioritize clicks and outrage over genuine intellectual exploration.
So instead of deep, thoughtful critique, it's more about scoring points or shutting down conversation altogether.
Sadly, sometimes it seems that way.
Yeah.
And Denois argues that this type of oversimplification and misapplication of these tools is only fueling the polarization we see everywhere, from politics to personal identity, even to our very understanding of truth itself.
That's a pretty sobering thought. So if we're trying not to fall into those traps of misinterpreting and weaponizing these ideas, where do we even begin?
That's a great question, and luckily Denois offers some insights. We'll dig into those right after the break.
We're back, and honestly, this whole conversation about postmodernism has my head spinning.
It's a lot to unpack, right?
It is. We've got Foucault and his ideas about power, then Derrida deconstructing language.
And on top of that, Derrida is warning us about how these ideas, while powerful,
can be twisted,
oversimplified.
especially in this digital age where everything moves so fast.
It can feel like everyone's just shouting their hot take without really grappling with the nuances.
So what are we supposed to do? How do we even begin to navigate all of this?
Well, Denois' message ultimately boils down to a call for balance and responsibility.
So it's not about throwing Foucault and Derrida out the window.
Not at all.
It's more about understanding the limitations of their theories.
Exactly. She keeps reminding us that they weren't trying to give us a rule book or a set of easy answers.
They were giving us tools.
Tools for thinking critically about the world around us.
But that takes work.
It does. It takes real work and a lot of nuance.
And it's way harder than it sounds,
Oh, absolutely.
especially when you've got social media algorithms basically spoon-feeding you information that already aligns with your worldview.
It's so easy to get stuck in those echo chambers where critical thinking goes to die.
Which is exactly what Denon is urging us to resist, right?
Exactly. She's advocating for a return to nuanced critical thinking.
Where we actually have to engage with different perspectives.
Even, or maybe especially those that make us uncomfortable.
Hmm.
She argues that real intellectual growth requires us to constantly challenge our own assumptions.
To really, truly consider other points of view.
Which, again, is much easier said than done,
Way,
right?
way easier. But if we want to build a future where we're not just talking past each other,
Where we can actually have meaningful conversations even when we disagree.
then it seems like a goal worth striving for.
It really is. Because ultimately, Danwo reminds us that knowledge is power.
But power can be used for good or for evil.
Exactly. It's all about how we use it. And these critical thinking frameworks we've been discussing,
We're like any other tool, right?
precisely, they can be misused. They can be used to manipulate, to silence, to twist the truth to fit our own agendas.
So it's up to each of us to make sure we're using them ethically and thoughtfully.
To approach these ideas with humility and a willingness to admit when we're wrong.
That's the hard part.
It is. But it's also what makes this whole endeavor so rewarding, right?
Because the more we understand these complex ideas, the better equipped we are to navigate this crazy, mixed-up world.
And to build a better future for ourselves and for generations to come.
That's something I think we can all get behind. Well, on that note, we'll leave you to ponder these ideas.
And keep those critical thinking gears turning.
Until next time.